Good morning, everybody. You are at the mFiles Quick Tips for today, sort of a special edition. We're here on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday. Today, I will be talking about mFiles admin and user accounts. Don't panic, don't fret. If you do not have access to admin, this will be recorded and posted to Marco YouTube so you can share with your mFiles administrator if they have questions dealing with user accounts and how to set those things up. Let's take a look at today's agenda. Before I go too far, I want to make sure everybody can hear my voice. So if you could raise your hand to let me know that you can hear me, that would be great. Awesome. Okay, we're getting that response. Okay, today I will be talking about user types and terms. So to get you familiar with some of that terminology, I will walk through adding a brand new user account to mFiles. I will also then show you how to add that new user to a mFiles group and also a named access control group. Then we'll talk about how you can disable that account. And then finally, we'll cover updating information, such as last name or email address. Okay, inside of mFiles, there's actually two different ways that you can actually authenticate a user, meaning controlling their username and password. The first way, obviously very obvious, is the Windows authentication. This information then is coming from your domain. So within your domain, like when you log onto your PC, your username there and password would be the same that you would use for mFiles. The other way is the mFiles method, which means you would have another username and password that would be separate from your PC username and password. Now, let's talk about license types. Before I get too far with this, your mFiles license is renewed annually, meaning you get a new license every year. That's either applied by myself to your server if we have access, or it is mailed to the individual, emailed to the individual that would be applying that license. So if you ever see a countdown appearing when you log into mFiles, please let your administrator know so that they can contact us to make sure that license is applied. Okay, named user. A named user is basically somebody that has a spot inside of mFiles all the time. More than likely, they are also coming from a Windows authentication. So when they fire up their PC, behind the scenes, you're automatically logging into mFiles as well. A concurrent user is an individual that would share a license with another user at your organization. So when they're inside of mFiles, they would have to be authenticated. When they log in, they put in their username and password, and they take up that concurrent license. When they're done, they have to log out to free up that license for somebody else to use. A read-only user is just what it says. They can only read information, with two exceptions. They can be involved in a workflow and advance that workflow to the next state, as well as show an assignment being completed. User groups inside of mFiles gives you an easy way to maintain permissions of certain groups of users. For example, you could have a group of users called managers that have a certain level of rights and permissions inside of mFiles. You could have another group called users that have a different level of control or permission inside of mFiles. By creating those groups, you can easily control permissions. As somebody leaves as a manager, you remove them from the group. When you hire a new manager, you put them in the manager group and they have the same access and rights and permissions as the other managers do inside of mFiles. Now, the second part of that is I actually sort of jumped into it a little bit with the group. So you create the group so that you control the people in the group, managers and users. Named access control list actually controls the permissions that each one of those groups would have. And that's an easy way to do it instead of doing it individually. And you can see that with large number of users of mFiles, it's very important to keep things organized and grouped together to simplify that process. Okay, let's actually dive in and do some demonstration. Okay, so let me actually get to, okay, so I'm inside of mFiles admin. So as you take a look at this, I want to create a brand new user account. Now, a quick thing, just in case you want to make sure the person's not already there, you have a way of actually viewing a list. So we can go to view and I could say list or filter, excuse me. And this way you could type in a person's name to see if they're there. So let's type in Mike. Mike is not there yet. So we're going to add Mike. So I'm going to go here to new login account. I have to do Mike's login. So let's see, that will be M, last name Larson. Now I'm not going to use Windows authentication. I'm going to use mFiles. So when I do that, I have to provide the password. Now Mike will be able to change that password the first time he logs into mFiles. If you use the Windows authentication, that password again is controlled by the domain. Okay, we put down his rest of his credentials down here. Okay, down here at the bottom, I can select if what kind of a license he's going to have. I'm going to give him a named user license, and he's not disabled, and he's not a system administrator. I click OK. Oh, I mistyped the password, so let me get that corrected. Okay, down at the bottom, click OK. We're good to go. Now, that is the first step of the process. As you take a look at this, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different vaults. So Mike is going to be part of the Marco training. So I'm going to expand Marco training vault. I'm going to go to users. As you can see here, Mike is not in this vault. So I'm going to click on new user. I go up here to the top for login accounts. I'm going to select Mike Larson. There he is. Now I can control what rights he would have here as well. I'm going to leave him at the default. And I'm going to click OK. So now Mike has been added as a login account. He's been created for a user for Vault. The next part of this is actually taking a look at the groups. So Mike happens to be a manager. So right below my users here are user groups. And when I select on my user groups, I have admin, managers, and users. So I'm going to go into the managers group, and these are the current managers I have now. So I can click add, and I'm going to locate Mike Larson. There he is. And I'm going to click add. So I've added Mike to the group of managers. Pretty simple. I'm going to click apply and click OK. Now, the next step of that is that named access control group. This is where you control what they can do inside of mFiles, the permissions. So by creating those groups, it's easy to manage that group of people, in this case, managers. So I have a control group called managers. I double click on that, and I can see I have the managers group in there. And when I select it, we can see what they can do. So they can actually delete, they can edit, and they can read, but they cannot change permissions. I'm going to click OK. That's all I needed to do with the named access group because I'm pulling from the user group managers, which I already added Mike Larson to that group. Now let's go back to our users. Actually, we're going to go back to login accounts. So now I'm at the high level. The next item to talk about is how about if a user no longer needs access to mFiles? So we're going to take a look at Fred Johnson here. So as I take a look at him, I can see he has one of our login accounts and he is no longer using mFiles. So I want to free up the license. So the first thing I want to do is I want to let the license open. So maybe I need it for somebody else. So I'm going to say no license. Then I'm going to go down here just to make sure. I'm going to say that his account is disabled as well. And when I click on apply, that will take effect next time he logs in. And when I click OK, you can see now, and I can filter by disabled accounts. I can see all the ones I have disabled. A quick rule of thumb is you never want to delete a user account or a login account. You always want to keep them out there because with them, if they were using mFiles in the past, you want to keep that history out there. Okay, so we've gone through the terms, adding a brand new user, user groups, named access control, and disabling a user. Let's talk about updating the user's information. So I happen to have an individual here called Jay Larson. She just got married. Her last name now is Jay Anderson. So now I'm not going to change anything here. What I need to do is create a brand new account. So this one is going to be Jay Anderson, and it's going to be mFiles authenticated. And I also need to update her email. She is, we're going to say that she doesn't have a license yet. And we're good to go. So I'm going to click OK. So now I created another Jill Anderson. So what I'm going to do is she happens to be a user in the Marco training. So I go to that and I'm going to go under Jill Larson. And I'm going to switch it from Jill Larson to Jill Anderson. You see that there. And I'm going to click OK. So now when I make that change, I'm going to go back to my login accounts. And I'm going to go to Jill Larson. Oops, excuse me. That's Mike Larson, Jill Larson. I'm going to now remove her license, disable the account. Again, I do not want to delete. Now I'm going to go to Jill Anderson, and I'm going to give her that license that I just freed up and apply that. And I've completed that. Now, what happens behind the scenes by doing it this way is when we take a look at M-Files, you can see a couple documents here. These were initially done by Jill Larson. Now, when we take a look at the profile, you'll see, and actually I'm going to log out and log back in as Jill Anderson. So these are Jill Larson. So I'm going to log out. And I'm going to log back in as Jill Anderson. Now, when we take a look at these documents, you can see that that history is still there with her name, but anything new she creates, if she was to create a new document here, let's create one real quickly. We'll add it to M-Files. I'll just pick a vendor, today's date, and click on create. And now when we take a look inside of M-Files, we can see it has a new profile of Jill Anderson and also keeping the history of Jill Larson. What I want to do at this point is I want to talk about if there's any questions. I did get one question in right now. And let me bring that up here. And that question is, do I have to create a user account for each vault that a user is going to be accessing? And the answer is yes. So inside of M-Files there, what you would need to do is go into each one of the vaults and add a new user, the one you just created from the login account, to each one of the vaults that they would have access to. I don't see any other questions. So let's move on to our closing here. Our next quick tip will be back on a regular day on Tuesday, September 17th at 10 a.m. I'll be talking about different document types and editing and saving. These will be document types other than your Microsoft Word, Excel, and things like that that have that integrated M-Files menu bar. If you would scan the QR code, that will take you to the actual webinar page where you can actually register for upcoming webinars at Marco as well as my quick tips. At the end of today's session, please take a moment and fill out the survey to let us know how we did today. I'd like to thank you for attending today's M-Files quick tips. Have a great day.